There's so much to know about Prince Turki, and I'm fairly sure that he will not be able to share all of it with you, so I think it's apropos that I take a minute or two to share a little bit of background on His Royal Highness. It's a pleasure and a privilege to introduce His Royal Highness Prince Turki bin Faisal Al Saud. His Royal Highness is a man that does not need an introduction to anyone familiar with the history of the Middle East in general and Saudi Arabia in particular. As a seasoned diplomat, one of the finest Washington has had, he is known for his tempered, direct voice on some of the world's most pressing issues. Prince Turki has served as the Saudi ambassador to the United States and the ambassador to the UK and the Republic of Ireland. Prior, he served for 25 years as the Director General of Saudi Arabia's General Intelligence Directorate. In this position, he played a key role in the military operation to remove hostage-taking terrorists from Masjid al-Haram, the sacred mosque in Mecca in 1979. Prince Turki currently teaches at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service and serves as the chairman of the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies in Riyadh. He is also a commissioner at the International Commission on Nuclear Non-Proliferation. His Royal Highness is also involved in a number of cultural and social activities. He is the founder and trustee of the King Faisal Foundation and one of the world's largest philanthropies, and is co-chair of the C100 Group, an affiliate of the World Economic Forum, which promotes interfaith dialogue and greater understanding between the West and Islamic countries. His Royal Highness is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies and chairs the board of the Prince Charles Visual Islamic and Traditional Arts Center. Prince Turki studied international law and jurisprudence at Princeton, Cambridge, and the University of London. He was a classmate of President Clinton's at Georgetown School of Foreign Service and is a graduate of the Lawrenceville School. He contributes and appears regularly in the New York Times, the Washington Post, PBS's Charlie Rose, and CNN's Fareed Zakaria and Wolf Blitzer's programs. We are delighted and honored to be hosting Prince Turki and recognize his invaluable contributions towards fostering better relations between the West and Saudi Arabia. It's a pivotal time in the history of the modern Arab world, and we are grateful to you, Prince Turki, for taking the time to come here today and share your remarks and insights on such a timely and important subject. Prince Turki will share his remarks and has graciously agreed to allow some time for question and answer. And we look forward to an engaging Q&A and request that your thoughts be framed as brief questions. Without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce a gentleman I have great respect and admiration for, His Royal Highness Prince Turki bin Faisal Al Saud.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أفضل المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Ladies and gentlemen, before I was so delightfully interrupted by Nadia Malik, I was going to thank the president of the college and the university for his hosting me here, and also to thank you for allowing me to speak at the Malik Lecture. I just came back from Riyadh last week, where I attended the sad event of the funeral of the late Crown Prince Sultan bin Aziz, God rest his soul. And the late Crown Prince was instrumental in helping establish the Islamic Center in Rochester. And his passing away is mourned here as it was in the kingdom. Saudi Arabia, about whose history and progress I wish to speak to you today, is not only my home, but it is also my favorite topic. As many of you may know, the modern version of Saudi state dates back to 1924, when the late King Abdulaziz united what was then the Kingdom of the Hijaz and the Sultanate of Najd and its dependencies into what became in 1932 the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He then called for the first Islamic conference since the dissolution of the Ottoman Caliphate in 1922. And in the inaugural speech of the conference in 1926, he stressed the need for Muslims to overcome their sectarian and political differences. And at a time when there were only 3 truly independent Muslim nations, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, he advised those who came from the mostly still colonized Muslim lands not to provoke the non-Muslims, but also to concentrate on sharing their skills and know-how to help each other. He stressed that his newly united realm needed the expertise of other Muslims, without regard to race or sect. As a matter of fact, his first act on entering the mosque in Mecca as a pilgrim was to appoint an Egyptian Muslim Shafi'i scholar as Imam of the mosque. Having opened up the kingdom to relations with the rest of the world, he began to face the emerging bigotry of some of his closest allies among the Bedouin chiefs who had worked with him to unite the kingdom. They developed political ambitions which they tried to convey in a religious context by accusing the king of consorting with infidels and introducing non-Muslim practices and tools, such as the radio and the automobile. After recurrent insurrections by these miscreants, the king called for a public debate between him and their leaders. And those who sat in judgment at this debate were the people and the religious scholars. More than 800 citizens attended the debate, and when they favored the king's argument, his opponents declared open rebellion. Fortunately, the king's military skill and popular appeal overcame them, and Saudi Arabia has become what it is today, a thriving modern country that contributes to the welfare of humanity. But the struggle continues, and the obstacles that face the late king continue in new forms, yet they are faced with the same determination and skill with which he dealt with them in earlier manifestations. In the years before the kingdom's establishment to the end of the Second World War, the kingdom's development proceeded, uninterrupted by internal strife or the external threats posed by inimical neighbors. After the war, the Palestinian problem has continued to bedevil the stability and security of the Middle East. The kingdom has and continues to hold the position that the rights of the Palestinians have been abrogated and they must be restored to them fully. These are the rights of self-determination, the right to a state with its capital in East Jerusalem, and the right to an identity. Unfortunately, the United States continues to stifle that dream by threatening to veto the UN Security Council resolution that the Palestinians have initiated at the UN to have a state of their own. Hopefully, with the help of the international community, this issue will be resolved soon rather than late. By the mid-50s, 60s, and 70s, the kingdom faced the challenge of the ambitions of the late Jamal Abdul Nasser of Egypt, who wanted to overthrow the Saudi government and establish a like-minded republic in the Arabian Peninsula. Equally unsettling was the growing influence of the then mighty Soviet Union, which promoted its ambitions through arms sales to Arab socialist countries and the nascent communist regime in South Yemen. Britain's withdrawal from east of Suez in 1971 led to scrambling among actors in the area for political gain and ideological ascendancy. The late King Faisal met these challenges with a skillful internal policy of political reform and external alliances with like-minded Arab countries and the United States. His 10-point program for reform, which he published when he was still Viceroy to the late King Saud in 1962, included the widening of women's education, the establishment of a Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Labor, and other equally pertinent acts. In 1965, he inaugurated a dialogue with the late Pope Paul VI, which culminated in the visit by the late Minister of Justice, Sheikh Mohammed al-Haqqan, to the Vatican, and the return visit of the late Cardinal Pignatelli to the kingdom. In that year, the king issued his call for Islamic solidarity, which culminated in the establishment of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which today is the second largest international body next to the United Nations, composed of 56 permanent member countries and 5 associate members, including the Russian Federation. The late king's handling of the oil embargo on America during the 1973 Ramadan War established the kingdom as the premier country in energy affairs, as one of the leaders in the Arab world, and as a leader of the Muslim world. Under the leadership of both the late King Khalid, who succeeded King Faisal in 1975, and the late King Fahd, who succeeded King Khalid in 1982, the kingdom prospered, but not without hiccups. The attack on the holy mosque referred to by Nadia Malik in Mecca in 1979 showed that political ambition in the guise of religious zeal was still as dangerous as it had been under the late King Aziz back in the 20s. The sanctity of the mosque, as well as the presence of hostages in the hands of the impious attackers of the mosque, hampered the operation of clearing them out. After 2 agonizing weeks, the mosque was cleared. In that year also, ladies and gentlemen, the revolution in Iran and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan began a bleak decade when the enemies of the kingdom seemed to be getting the upper hand. The zeal with which the late Imam Khomeini tried to export his revolution meant that there were inevitable differences between him and the kingdom. These differences led to clashes between Iranian pilgrims and Saudi security forces during the pilgrimage in the mid-80s, which led to a break in diplomatic relations with Iran. They were not restored until 1995. The Iran-Iraq War, which began in September 1980 and did not end until 1988, also exacerbated relations between the kingdom and Iran, especially after 1982, when Iranian forces pushed out the Iraqis and declared their intention to invade Iraq. The kingdom then came to the aid of Iraq, and the Iranians at one time in 1985 sent 2 aircraft to bomb Saudi oil field facilities in Ras Al Noura, but they were shot down by the Saudi Air Force. Then, in 1987-88, 4 Saudi diplomats were assassinated in Bangkok, and Iranian embassy officials were responsible. We're reminded these days of that act by the attempted assassination of the Saudi ambassador in Washington. In Afghanistan, the kingdom cooperated with Pakistan and the United States to help Pakistan in preventing the Soviet Union from arching into Islamabad by providing the Afghan Mujahideen with military supplies, training, and intelligence. The kingdom never supplied any men to the Mujahideen because they said that they did not need any. In any case, we were concerned that the Soviet Union would find any evidence of Saudi interference in Afghanistan and to use that as a pretext to attack Pakistan. And in the 90s, the kingdom was met by the challenge of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, an event of which you are certainly well aware. The kingdom's adroit handling of that crisis is a measure of the wise leadership of the late King Fahd and his then Crown Prince Abdul. After the war, King Fahd initiated a far-reaching reform of the basic law of governance, the re-establishment of the Consultative Assembly, the definition of the rule of succession, and many subsequent reforms in the judiciary, the economy, and the role of women in society. In September 2001, the whole world was faced with the diabolical and vicious attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon, which killed more than 3,000 people, including 300 Muslims. The stunning depravity of these deeds overwhelmed the emotions of all people. In the kingdom, it led us to look deep into our souls and search for what could have led 15 Saudi citizens to commit such a heinous crime. There was no attempt to rationalize or excuse ourselves. On the contrary, King Fahd and Crown Prince Abdullah began a dedicated campaign to root out any resident evil that had caused that tragedy. Education, religious sermons, mosque preachers, newspapers, and books were all purged of any material that could in any way lead to extremist thought. The process is still ongoing and continues to this day. The Higher Council of the Ulama, which is the kingdom's highest religious authority, has issued many fatwas outlawing terrorism, hijacking, and suicide bombings. It also added another fatwa outlawing the financing of terrorism and making it a capital offense. The cult of Bin Laden, however, is following in the footsteps of previous groups who cloak their political ambitions in the robes of religion. And it is important to note that Bin Laden's first enemy was not America or Western civilization. Just read his literature. His sworn enemy was Saudi Arabia. He viewed the kingdom as the main stumbling block to his political ambitions. And I shall return to what is being done about this matter later. In 2003, King Fahd called for women to have an equal role with men in the development of the kingdom. However, by then, because of King Fahd's health, King Abdullah had assumed the daily conduct of affairs. In that capacity, and in an attempt to realize King Fahd's vision, he introduced the National Dialogue, which is a forum for men and women to discuss controversial issues such as terrorism, women's role in society, educational reform, religious speech, and many others. In this 9th year of the dialogue, it moves from town to town, from province to province, holding public meetings where everybody can have his or her say. And all the sessions are televised live on television so that the Saudi public can follow it. It is a very Saudi way of soul-searching and participatory discussion. And in 2002, King Abdullah introduced the Arab Peace Initiative, which was adopted by the all Arab countries in Beirut. It calls for total Israeli withdrawal from the occupied Arab lands, including East Jerusalem, an agreed-upon solution for the issue of refugees in return for total Arab recognition of Israel, an end to hostilities, and normalization of relations. We are still waiting for an Israeli acceptance of this fair and equitable solution. Throughout the first decade of this century, King Abdullah has established the Supreme Economic Council, led the kingdom into the World Trade Organization, revitalized the Supreme Petroleum Council, and reorganized the judiciary so that it can deal more justly and efficiently with today's world, including the dictates of the WTO. He initiated a scholarship program for Saudi students to study abroad, and now we have more than 100,000 Saudi students throughout the finest academic institutions in more than 50 countries. In this country, we have over 40,000 Saudi students. He also quadrupled the number of Saudi universities to meet the demands of a growing number of Saudi youngsters who want to acquire the skills to meet the complex demands of the future. But the king considered the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, better known as KAUST, as the jewel in the crown. It is a postgraduate co-ed research university where the student population is more than 65% non-Saudi, where the president is a Singaporean Chinese scientist, and where the board of trustees is composed of distinguished academics and civic leaders from all over the world. This is a truly remarkable achievement to counter the nihilist opposition that seeks to destroy rather than to build. The king also established a rehabilitation program for those extremists who did not commit capital crimes to wean them away from their narrow-minded view of the world. When they are arrested, they undergo psychological profiling, then they are reconnected with their families, and subsequently they're brought before religious scholars who try to show them the errors of their ways. The recidivism rate of this program has been about 15%, which we consider to be quite successful. Nevertheless, the program is still a work in progress and is being modified with experience. The King's other jewel in the crown, ladies and gentlemen, is his call for dialogue between religions and cultures. This has grown out of the King's firm belief that people have more in common than divides them. He started by calling the Muslim world to a conference in the holy city of Mecca in June 2008. He asked the representatives at the conference to delegate him to initiate a dialogue with other religions and cultures. And when they blessed his message, he then invited leaders from all over the world to another conference in Madrid. The Spanish monarch, Juan Carlos, gracefully acted as host. From there, the King took his call to the United Nations General Assembly, where more than 60 heads of states and governments convened and supported the King. A General Secretariat was inaugurated last month in Vienna to carry on the work. Last September, the King confirmed the right of women to vote and be elected in our electoral process, as well as to be appointed to the Shura Council, which is the equivalent of Parliament. Finally, with the passing of the late Crown Prince Sultan, who served his country nobly as our Defense and Aviation Minister for nearly 5 decades, Crown Prince Naif has been named the heir successor to the throne. And that was done through the Bay'ah Council, which was established by King Abdullah 6 years ago, and which has institutionalized the succession for kingship in the kingdom. Crown Prince Naif has also tirelessly and wisely served his country for many decades in various ministries and capacities. Those familiar with him know that he is a staunch and loyal advocate of progress in the kingdom. Despite some reports in the Western press that have painted him as overly conservative and liable to undo many of the reforms started by King Abdullah. Indeed, one famous Arab journalist, Jihad al-Khazin, who has personally interviewed Prince Naif several times when writing for Al-Hayat newspaper in London, put it well yesterday when he said, Prince Naif will not abolish any decisions made by King Abdullah. The rule in Saudi Arabia is not individual. Rather, it reflects the consensus of the people and the leadership. In short, the forward-looking reforms that we have seen in Saudi Arabia under King Abdullah, that have so well positioned the country to become a global leader in so many areas in the 21st century, will continue under new leadership. For these reforms have been done for the overall good of the nation and not through the temporary whim of one leader. Ladies and gentlemen, I could go on for days recounting the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's internal progress and its contributions to humanity. But let me simply close by saying that the people of the Kingdom believe that they have been honored and blessed to be the servants and the custodians of Islam's 2 holy mosques. Further, they have every intention of continuing to serve their religion and by extension the world in that capacity under the leadership of King Abdullah, whose concerted effort is to leave a positive legacy of service to humanity. Thank you very much.